Hey, it's Jacob again, and we'll be picking up right where we left off. So, these price controls reveal something about the nature of markets. There is only one price at which there's no shortage or surplus, and that's the price that maximizes quantity traded. Because if you were to raise the price, then consumers wouldn't want to buy as much. If you were to lower it, producers wouldn't want to produce as much. Either way, the quantity that actually gets sold is going to fall. And so, if you move the price around, you might benefit one party by rigging it in favor of them, but that comes at the other party's expense. But what you're definitely going to do is you're going to destroy total wealth. You can play these redistribution games. You can rig it so that somebody benefits at somebody else's expense, but you cannot create wealth out of a price control. Because a price control can only disincentivize production. You either wind up with shortages or surpluses. And the magic of the market is that it's going to naturally pick the surplus maximizing point. Whether you're talking about consumers bidding a price up or producers bidding a price down, self-interest leads to the market implementing the socially efficient outcome. It leads to the highest quantity traded possible being chosen. Well, how do central planners do it? How does a command economy do it? And the answer is they don't. Because communist countries constantly suffer both shortages and surpluses. And I've got a little story to tell that helps to illustrate that. So this is the Sears Roebuck catalog, 1897 edition. And it's not an original copy, it's a reproduction. But what this does, or what this is it is the Amazon.com of the Gilded Age. So imagine back in the day, you want to buy something, but they don't stock it in stores near you. What are you to do? Do you go trekking across the country on trains and by wagon to go find a violin, to find a hat for yourself? No. What you do is you get out your catalog, you look up the specific product you want, you look up its code, and then you send off in the mail instructions. Here's my mailing address. Here's the check or cash. Here's the products I want. It's the snail mail version of Amazon. And it was an incredible system. Of course, it was slow as hell, but you could buy anything that the heart desired. Any product under the sun, you could find within this thing. It's like looking into a museum of American culture of the time. Need to buy yourself a new wagon to get around town? We've got that for you. Here's you a grade A Michigan cut under Surrey for 89 bucks. 1 horsepower, 2 horsepower. How much horsepower is up to you? Just add more horses. You want to buy yourself a firearm out of the mail? You could do that back then. Wasn't regulated like it is now. Get yourself a high power, high capacity California non-compliant assault musket. Have it shipped to your door. Give it to little Billy as a Christmas gift. You see here, you got silverware, you've got services, you've got pipes for smoking your tobacco. Jewelry, watches, This is more fun when I do it in person, you know. You got books. Here you've got the women's fashion section. Buy yourself a dress, buy yourself a coat. Looks hot. And of course, they stock only the finest products in here. Only the truly respected brands. And you know, because it's all Acme quality. Giant Acme gasoline stoves. You have no idea how much that delighted me when I found that in there. That's not just from Coyote and Roadrunner. They they were making fun of, you know, real stuff. But my favorite of all, my most beloved part of this book has to be the medicine section. So, got an addiction? Addicted to opium and morphia and laudanum? Well, here's your opium and morphia cure. Made of 100% genuine opium and morphine. Got a problem with the liquor habit? Can't stop drinking? Well, here's your genuine liquor habit cure. Guaranteed to cure you of your alcoholism. Whoever knew it was that easy? Why try Ozempic when you could have Dr. Rose's obesity powders for the fat folk? 100% genuine asbestos. Makes you wonder, you know, what apparently we could cure everything back in the day. What happened? There's one that'll cure you of your smoking addiction. What went wrong? Why don't we use these wonderful products anymore? And fellers, this one will help you with your girlfriends. Oh, it's somewhere in here. Female pills for weak women. Cure the female hysteria. I suggest on your own time, look up alternative cure for the female hysteria. It's very eye-opening. This Sears Roebuck catalog was a truly remarkable innovation. And you know, my pa, he used it when he was a kid. You could buy a freaking house out of this thing. If any of you have played Red Dead Redemption 2, you already are familiar with this. You could buy a mail order house and a mail order bride to go in the mail order house. Everything under the sun, all of the fruits of the capitalist system included in one giant tome, this encyclopedia of everyday life. And it has at least 10,000 distinct items in it. Now, I want you to cast yourself in the role of a communist central planner. I don't remember what the Chinese bureau was called. In the Soviet Union, it was Gosplan. Suppose that you have been picked by a glorious supreme dictator to run the economy, and you have to set prices and quantities for everything. Because even in communist societies, they still had stores and they still had money. It was impractical to give people rations. Among other things, not all families use the same amounts of different goods. Not all people want the same stuff. So your job is to decide how much gets produced. You have to set the price at the final store. You have to decide how much to stock on shelves around the country. And you have 10,000 products to keep track of. Okay, that's intimidating, isn't it? But maybe it's not so bad. You have a whole bureau. Maybe you hire a few hundred men, a few hundred economists. You estimate how much is needed. Keep in mind, if you screw up your job, it causes chaos. It causes chaos in people's lives, but more importantly, if you screw this up when it comes to production lines, it could bring everything crashing to a halt because of how much the different production lines are intertwined. But you think you can do it. And then you realize your first problem. You can't use the same price for every place. Transportation costs. See, just like ordering from Amazon, in the Sears Roebuck catalog, you had to pay the transportation fee. But when you go to buy something in a store, they don't charge you a transportation fee. That's just included in the markup. Well, you're selling things out of stores. So everything has to have its own price. Okay, well, let's be generous and let's suppose that every different state gets one price. In reality, it's probably a lot more granular than that. You've probably noticed that gasoline tends to be more expensive in the cities than in the countryside, for example. But let's be generous and let's say that it's just states. Okay, how much how many prices do I need then? Well, in the People's Republic of China, they had 22 provinces. So for every good, you need to calculate the price of the good for each province. So 22 times 10,000 is 220,000. Oh no, this has gotten a lot harder. Oh crap. Here's another problem. That Sears Roebuck catalog, it only deals with specific brands. And it only deals with finished consumer goods. There is a little bit of hardware. There is a hardware section. But it's going to sell you the hat. It's not going to sell you the felt to make the hat. It's going to sell you the wagon. It's not going to sell you each individual screw on the wagon. See, your factories, even if they're all state run, even if they're not having to buy the inputs, buy the raw resources, buy the parts that finished goods are made from, they still have to have quantities. You still have to decide how much to make. Well, shoot, there's potentially dozens of distinct parts in every single good. Some things are going to be simpler than others. Something like that ladle, that probably can be made from like one piece of metal. But something like the wagon, there's so many different pieces on it. Dozens, maybe hundreds. And are all raw resources the same? Is there just one price for wood? Is there just one price for coal? Is there one price for oil? Well, unless you're going into geology or going into petroleum engineering or something like that, you've probably never given it any thought. And the answer is no. There's different types of oil. There's different types of coal. They have different uses. They have different qualities and different prices. You could have a whole book just of different kinds of wood with different prices. At every step of the way, we can come up with a new problem, a new bit of nuance to add, which adds an order of magnitude of new prices that have to be set. How many were we at? 220,000? Well, God, it's got to be in like the hundreds of millions now. There might actually be more prices on goods than there are people on this earth. And you, Mr. Central Planner, Mr. Gospel on Minister, have to figure it all out. But okay, you say, well, maybe I can do it. I will never, and keep in mind, these are all interconnected too. It's not a problem where you can just solve them one at a time, because every good depends on every other good. Even if it doesn't take another good as an input, the demand for the different goods depends on the prices of each other. So it's a problem that all has to be solved at once. And how do the Soviets, how do the Chinese, how do they deal with this? Well, they invent an entirely new field of mathematics called linear programming. I know some of you STEM bros will be familiar with that. They invent linear programming just to try to solve this problem. And their linear programming, this is like solving systems of equations. Most of you should have had that in high school. They're basically doing systems of equations with millions of equations, which means that it's too complicated to do by hand. They're going to have to develop computer science so that they can automate the process. The Soviets don't invent the computer. It's basically invented by the British for cryptanalysis. But they're going to heavily develop the computer for this task. They're building facilities that have giant mechanical brains. You think back to the days when a computer filled a whole room. Huge computer complexes just chugging away, deciding how much a tomato is going to be worth. But then here was the real critical flaw with it all. See, if the world had stood still, they would have eventually gotten the answer. They would have eventually solved it and came up with that answer of what should the world look like? What should the prices be? What should the quantities be? But the issue is the world doesn't stand still, and the world constantly changes. Remember my bucket of water in the wind metaphor? I said, why are we usually not at equilibrium? This theory I'm telling you, it says that we move towards equilibrium. So why are shortages still so common? Why are surpluses so common? And I told you it's because we're constantly experiencing shocks. The equilibrium is constantly moving around, but it's always trying to get back to the right direction. The wind blows the bucket one way and the water sloshes. Well, that's how the market works. But in the command economy, when demand or supply move, the prices and quantities don't move with it. They don't move until the government tells it to. Until that bureaucrat decides what the new price should be and circulates out the new orders to tell all of the store managers and the factory managers and the farm managers what it needs to be, and they get the chance to implement it. And it's slow. It is so incredibly slow. The command economy could not beat the market economy on speed. And so even though neither one actually settled at equilibrium, the market economy was just always faster about it. Many people are familiar with shortages in communist societies. They understand that they often had famines. They understand that they often lived poor lives, that they had few goods, few comforts. What's often missed, though, is that the flip side of shortage was surplus. They would have crushing poverty and privation, while at the same time having huge overabundance of things they didn't need. One year, you would have a shortage of shoes, and kids would have to go to school barefoot, while they would have so much bread that the bread would be molding on the shelves. And then the next year, they would overcorrect. And they would have famine, but they'd have warehouses overflowing with shoes. Some things were more predictable. Some things were more stable than others. And there were other problems with the command economy as well. Problems that had to do with corruption. Problems that had to do with perverse incentives. An incentive to lie. An incentive to cheat, to not work hard. But even if they'd had a perfect people, they would have still struggled with this. There's a common misunderstanding. People will say communism was good on paper, but human nature prevented it from working. It was good in theory, but people couldn't make it work. And it's the opposite. Every man in the Soviet Union could have been an angel, and the system would have still failed. Because it wasn't a moral problem, it was an engineering problem. They had an incredibly complex information system that wasn't up to the task. It couldn't calculate fast enough to keep pace with things. And they couldn't collect enough data to answer their own questions. And poverty was the consequence. No amount of bureaucrats with limited knowledge could have ever made it work. It was doomed. In the end, you know what the People's Republic of China did? Some of their economic planners, unable to keep pace with all of the supply and demand shocks, unable to solve this intractable problem, took copies of the Sears Roebuck catalog and just started picking prices out of it. Because even though they lived in a very different country with very different tastes, very different productive capabilities, the numbers in that book were closer to reality than anything that they could come up with on their own. This is called the economic calculation problem. How do you collect and analyze so much data to keep an economy working properly? And centralization, planning by bureaucrat, cannot solve it. So how does the market solve it? What market economies do, by contrast, is use the knowledge of everyone. Instead of giving control of the economy over to a small group of technocrats, a small group of experts, instead, it has everyone pitch in. And the way it works is the decision to buy or not buy sends a signal. We call these price signals. It sends a signal of if there should be more or less production and where that production should go. See, market economies do have economic planning. It's just that it's decentralized. Everyone chips in. Everyone plans for themselves. And then by this binary decision of buy at the margin, don't buy at the margin, sell at the margin, don't sell at the margin, it acts like a great organic computer. Your first book, Matt Ridley, Rational Optimist, he uses this metaphor of the collective brain, which I think is very apt. A brain dynamically emerging out of other people's interactions. And it's able to operate faster because it's decentralized. Because it can draw upon everyone in a country. And because it kicks in automatically without having to go through bureaucratic processes, without someone having to consciously issue new orders, it's capable to adapt in real time. It's miraculous.